Hey, welcome back, everyone. Interesting episode today. I was seeing some rumors that they were creating, well, new ways of vaccinating people. One of them being genetically modified foods. And I saw some tweets on this that looked like they were just screenshots. I looked into it. Some of the tweets turned out to not be real. But when I looked deeper into some of the research, I found out yes, they are in fact creating programs like this. There are many well underway. And there are programs right now to genetically modify common foods, including tomatoes and basic fruits, vegetables, in ways that do administer vaccines. And there are programs as well, even including tobacco, looking at how to include the COVID-19 vaccines in food. I found this pretty surprising because I haven't really seen any mainstream coverage on it as far as I've seen. I want to detail some of the research I've done on this, and it's wild stuff, folks. Also, I want to go into some of the Republican tax plans. They're talking about the idea, well, they're floating the idea of a 23% tax to replace income tax. Replace all taxes, including even allowing them to abolish the IRS. I'll be going into that, a lot of other stories, so stick around. And folks, that said, thank you for being here. Those of you on YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, Facebook, we'll jump over exclusively to Epoch TV after about 25 minutes. Be sure to join us there. That said, let's jump into it. I want to start first on the idea of foods to deliver human vaccines. And I'm just going to show you a bunch of medical papers. We're going to go through a few of them. The original research I probably had like 25 different reports. I whittled them down because they start just repeating themselves. But I can say there are numerous scientific reports detailing the research on what they call oral vaccines, specifically using genetically modified foods. Let me show you one. This is from PubMed through the NIH. It says, development of oral vaccines for human use. And in this report, it says, in developed and developing countries, oral vaccine formulations that elicit protection at mucosal surfaces are attractive vaccine candidates. Research has shown that vaccine delivery using either oral or non-viral vector delivery or heterologous proteins via the oral route is highly effective. In other words, oral, you eat it, right? It's a vaccine that you eat. Further, it states recently recombinant plant viruses grown in plants or transgenic plants have been proposed as edible vaccines for human use. In other words, they're genetically modifying plants. Some of these include like parts of plants. Some of them include genetically modifying like tomatoes and stuff like that. And the idea is to alter these plants so that the plants carry vaccinations that you can then consume, and again, it will function as an oral vaccine. And it said food plants offer many advantages as affordable oral vaccines, especially for use in developing countries. Let me show you another report. This is from Taylor Francis Online, and it says approaches to new vaccines. And they say further in, the use of DNA encoding antigens from pathogenic viruses, bacteria, and parasites as vaccines is a new approach that is receiving considerable attention. This and other innovative approaches, including vaccine production in plants, are appraised in this review. So I wanted to include this one to show that they're doing other types of experiments alongside this. When we think of vaccinations currently, we're thinking of someone putting a shot in your arm. You're thinking of needles and injections. You're not thinking of DNA encoding. You're not thinking of genetically modified plants. You're not thinking of like tomatoes on the store shelf. I wouldn't think of that. But let me show you some more. This is another one from Frontiers in Immunology. It says oral mRNA vaccines against infectious diseases. A bacterial perspective. I wanted to include this because I was curious if mRNA vaccines were included in this research, and yes, they are. It says the mRNA vaccines from Pfizer/BioNTech and Moderna were granted emergency approval in record time in the history of vaccinology and played an instrumental role in limiting the pandemic caused by SARS-CoV-2, the COVID-19 virus. The success of these vaccines resulted from over 3 decades of research from many scientists. However, scientists who actually call into question this, but we won't get into that part. It says, however, the development of orally administratable mRNA vaccine development is surprisingly underexplored. Our group specializing in salmonella-based vaccines explored the possibility of oral mRNA vaccine development. Interestingly, some of these do look into, for example, using kind of what you would call like bacteria or things that grow on plants as a way to carry this. They were looking into, for example, salmonella as carriers for vaccines, for example. I want to go into the real meat of it now, including how this ties directly into how they're altering foods for this, and then I want to go into how this applies to COVID-19 directly. Let me show you now some of the research on actually using foods to administer vaccines. Because that's the big question, right? Oral vaccines, they're genetically modifying plants, they're studying it. Are they actually talking about using food as a delivery method to vaccinate people, where they're altering the food itself? And if you want to eat, you're going to get vaccinated. Well, yes, they are. This is PubMed again through the NIH, and it says, foods as production and delivery vehicles for human vaccines. And it says further in the last several years, a novel approach for developing improved mucosal subunit vaccines has emerged by exploiting the use of genetically modified plants. It has been demonstrated that plant-derived antigens are functionally similar to conventional vaccines and can induce neutralizing antibodies in mammalian hosts. Further, it states that food crops, i.e. food that you grow, can play a significant role in promoting human health by serving as vehicles for both production and delivery of vaccines. And the big one here, going directly into COVID-19 and the vaccines for COVID-19. Many people chose not to get vaccinated for COVID-19. Many people, or get the shots, whatever you want to call it. Many people are choosing to not get the booster shots. It's reaching a point now where if you want to eat the food on your plate, maybe you're going to have to get that vaccine because it's going to be contained in the food itself. And this is from directly the the National Library of Medicine through the NIH, and this is a report from July of 2022. This is straight from the horse's mouth, in other words. And it says, emerging trends of edible vaccine therapy for combating human diseases, especially COVID-19. Pros, cons, and future challenges. It's a very large report, but I'll just go into the meat of it. It says the spike protein, i.e. of COVID-19, can be used to produce a vaccine against COVID-19. When talking about these spike proteins they're putting into these plants and so on. They say when the gene of spike protein or subunit of spike-like is inserted into a plant expression vector, the desired plant, such as lettuce, tomato, or cucumber, can be transformed. You getting that? So they can insert this, spike protein into plants, and basically, rather than using an injected vaccine as a carrier for, part of the spike protein, which remember we were talking about COVID-19. They're part of the cited problem people are having with the virus is the problem of the spike protein is what a lot of people are citing. They're saying they can put this into plants and basically elicit the same response as if they had vaccinated you. It says the resulting transgenic plants can be eaten raw as salad and immunized for the human being to combat the novel virus, i.e. COVID-19. Many groups of scientists are working together on a vaccine to defend humans against the new, COVID-19 virus. I won't go into all this because it's actually a really long report, and yes, I did read a lot of these last night. But further in, it states this. Just to show you some of the actual groups working on this, and forgive me if I say some of this stuff wrong. It says, Medisago, a Canadian biopharmaceutical company, has created a coronavirus VLP, and a VLP stands for virus-like particles. after getting the genetic sequence of SARS-CoV-2 in just 20 days. It took them 20 days to do this. SARS-CoV-2, again, being COVID-19, the novel coronavirus based off the original SARS virus. It says they employed a technique that involved introducing a genetic sequence encoding the COVID-19 spike protein into agrobacterium, a common soil bacterium that plants eat. In other words, they're putting it into the bacteria within the soil that the plants then consume. Are you getting this? They've found a way to get the COVID-19 spike protein into one of the nutrients or bacterium that plants consume when they pull nutrients from the soil, thereby getting into the plant itself. And it says this, the created plants, because again, the plant then adopt some of this, right? The created plants form a VLP, a virus-like particle, that is made up of a plant lipid membrane and the COVID-19 spike protein. The spike protein has now become part of the plant. It says Nicotiana bethemiana, a closely related to tobacco plant, so it's similar to tobacco but not quite tobacco, is being used by Medisago to create SARS-CoV-2 virus VLPs, again, virus-like particles. And they say COVID-19, the VLPs are identical in size and form to coronaviruses. These are like coronavirus plants is what they're making. And it says, but they lack the RNA/DNA and so are not infectious. Maybe until you consume them, but who knows. It says Medisago completed phase 1 clinical trials satisfactory and is now progressing to phase 2 clinical trials. Medisago has already developed VLPs containing influenza viruses, hemagglutinin, demonstrating their safety and efficacy in animal models and human clinical studies. They're already testing this on humans, in other words. I won't go over all this, but further when it states this, another company doing this, Kentucky Bioprocessing. And it says Kentucky Bioprocessing, on the other hand, is developing its own fast-growing GM, i.e. genetically modified, tobacco, and has openly declared that it is previously undertaking preclinical tests that can produce up to 3 million dosages per week. A tobacco plant that can carry the SARS-CoV-2 vaccinations. Further in it states, the third private sector research group is a collaboration between iBio and in the United States and Beijing CC Farming in China. It's an American company working together with a Chinese company specifically on this. And it says in these groups, these companies, they say, it says which is coupling COVID-19 VLP, again, virus-like particles, culture with a Chinese carrier immunostimulatory adjuvant in GM tobacco. In other words, they're again looking at how to make tobacco plants, in this case, carriers of this COVID-19 vaccine. I wanted to do a segment on this because some of you were bringing to my attention links to, originally there was a tweet going around. It was a Bill Gates tweet. And the tweet allegedly from Bill Gates said that he was saying that they need to get vaccines into foods. I was looking for that tweet. I could not find it. And at this point, I don't believe the tweet was real. I don't know if that was meant as basically a psyop, basically trying to claim this entire issue was fake, or if maybe he deleted it or something else. Regardless of the point, I think it's kind of losing the forest for the trees, because whether or not Bill Gates talked about it, there are very widespread scientific research programs ongoing as we speak, looking to vaccinate people. Man, I don't know if willfully or not at this point, but by altering foods. And we've looked at tobacco-like substances, tomatoes, lettuce, cucumbers. Imagine getting your vaccine salad in the morning. And already some of these programs are already in the human test phase. Remember that there was through Trump's Operation Warp Speed, the release of the vaccines, the COVID-19 vaccines, was sped up. And so programs that were still technically in early clinical trials were made public. And the shots we ended up getting, well, some people got, um, were really still early experimental shots. They were not in any way, in any normal sense, ready for public release, and in the way that you would normally ever do that. And so I want to make it clear, I did not find a direct connection to Bill Gates. I know that was the main accusation people had. But absolutely, there are programs very far along looking to basically integrate the COVID-19 vaccines and other vaccines directly into the food supply. I don't know if this would be like wide scale or if you go and get your tomato from your doctor, but they are doing this. They're doing this on a large scale already. And the reports I showed you are a small fraction of the ones actually pulled up, but basically they just start repeating themselves. You'd start seeing the basic same information over and over again. And so I did cut out the fat, so to speak. I just limited it to just some of the reports that just stated the same thing. I just cut them down to 1 instead of 5. But there are tons of reports on this. There are tons of reports detailing this type of research.